everyone, this is Mr. Appel, and we're going to now look at evaluating a couple of examples of piecewise functions. I've touched on this a bit already, but we'll go into a tiny bit more detail. So here's a piecewise function that we see here defined. Notice this is in fact a step function, and I know it's a step function because everything here is defined, they're all constants. Right, it's y equals 12 over some domain, it's y equals 15 over some domain, y equals 20, right? The y values aren't changing based on the x. They're going to be horizontal graphs, etc. They'll make more sense once we get into some examples that aren't that. But this question's asking me to evaluate the piecewise function for x equals -1 and then for x equals 3. So for x equals -1, which is just really me evaluating f of -1, I first have to determine which domain I'm in. So I'm just going to say which domain is -1 a part of. Well, -1 is not part of, sorry, -1 is not less than -3. -1 is between -3 and 6. And so that is our domain. Well, really, that's our domain, but the function over that domain is defined to be 15, so f of -1 is 15. Great. And then I'm going to erase that, and now we're going to evaluate the second one, which is f of 3. And f of 3 is, again, 3 is between -3 and 6, so f of 3 is also 15. If I asked you to evaluate, let's say, f of 10, all right, well now 10 is in this third interval. It's greater than or equal to 6, and so f of 10 would be 20. And that is how you evaluate when it's a constant. Now let's look at a more interesting example. I wouldn't say more interesting necessarily, but just a different example. So here we've got another piecewise function. So here the function is defined to be 2x plus 1 for x is less than or equal to 2, but then it becomes x squared minus 4 when x is greater than 2. So when x is -1, so in other words, h of -1, first determine which interval that's in. So -1 is not greater than 2. -1 is less than 2, and so we're going to use this part of the function. The function is 2x plus 1 there, and so h of -1 is just 2 times -1 plus 1. All right, we're just going to plug our x value in. That's -2 plus 1, which is -1. Okay. Now if I want to evaluate h of 4, the value of this function when x is 4, well, 4 is greater than 2, and so now we're going to use x squared minus 4. So 4 squared is 16, 16 minus 4 is 12, and so h of 4 is 12. And that is how you evaluate piecewise functions. That's all for now. Thanks.